bands that were around at that time, especially when GNR was just coming up in the Hollywood scene and everything. Um, what about GNR appealed to you so much that you go, that's the band right there. That's the band that I want to pay tribute to.
Well, when you're doing tribute bands, of course you want an iconic one because of the appeal. There are when I started doing tribute bands, not Appetite for Destruction, but I started way back in the '90s when tribute bands were a in its kind of infancy, and the top dogs for quite a while was a band called Atomic Punks,
Mm-hmm.
and they used to have. Um, I believe his stage name is Michael Starr. I know him by his real name, um, but he's now singing for Steel Panther. But back in those days, he used to sing for Atomic Punks, and they were like the top dogs. And at that time, I was kind of getting back into music back in the '90s because I had kind of left music. I back in the '80s I did originals just like everybody else in Los Angeles while Guns N' Roses were playing in Los Angeles, and even before Guns N' Roses were playing in Los Angeles. And but I did that for at least 10 years doing original material. And then my daughter was born, and things like life happens, and I started working for a large musical instrument retail company and started doing that, and kind of left music for a while. My focus was going in different areas, but then when my children got old enough, and it just became more feasible, I was drawn back to wanting to play music. And at that time, it's just more of like a casual, my thinking was, well, I'll just do a cover band and just do it for fun. And so I started doing a cover band, and I hated it. Not a knock on cover bands, but it just wasn't very appealing to me, singing say like 4 sets a night, getting home at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, doing that whole thing. It was kind of a grind, especially when you have a job. And so I started noticing the tribute bands. Of course, Atomic Punks was doing that at that time, and they were the big dogs. And I went to the band I was playing with, and I basically said, why are we doing this, kind of killing ourselves playing 4 sets when we can do very similar to what we used to do back in the '80s, which is an hour to an hour and a half set, and get paid the same amount of money, and be able to go home at a decent hour. So at first, the band was really against it, and they didn't like the idea of dressing up like somebody, and that whole thing. And but finally, when we were playing, at that time, every time we played something by Cheap Trick, the place would come alive. So I went to the guys and I said, hey, why don't we do a Cheap Trick tribute band? And so they go, oh, okay, kind of begrudgingly and everything like that. And I created a band called Dream Police, and I was bleaching my hair blonde, and
That's
wearing,
wonderful.
dressing up like Robin Zander with a suit and tie. And it was kind of fun because I had always dressed up like a rocker on stage, and doing a lead singer that's all dapper and everything like that was kind of fun, and did that for about 9 years. And the only reason, you know, I had a lot of fun, but the only reason why I didn't really want to continue after about 9 years was because we were always opening for someone else. Cheap Trick was, you know, very popular, but they weren't, you know, popular enough to carry the headlining, you know, the weight of the show. And so I wound up at that time, you know, I had gained some notoriety, you know, because, you know, I was getting pretty good at what I was doing as far as putting bands together and, you know, promoting shows and stuff like that. And so I decided to take another turn, and I put together a Soundgarden / Audio Slave tribute band, and that one was called Audio Slave. And I mean Audio Garden, and did that for about 4 years. But you know, the same thing kind of happened. You know, at that time, it wasn't enough to really carry the headlining. And while I was doing that band, I was at work, and one of my coworkers came up to me and asked me. He told me that they had a show. Their band had a show at the Orange County Fairgrounds, and it was a Slash tribute band. And they asked me if I would sing for it, and I was telling them, well, you know, I'm really, you know, I'm kind of busy doing what I'm doing with this, with Audio Garden.
Yeah.
And at first I kind of turned him down, but he was a good friend, and he goes, please, like, and so I go, okay, and so they gave me the material, and I told them, you know, that, you know, like, you know, because I'm busy and everything like that, I'm only going to be able to do one rehearsal. And you know, I'm going to show up to that rehearsal, and I'm going to be ready to go. I'm going to know all the material. I'm going to have everything memorized, and I'm going to have everything ready to go. And if the rest of the guys in the band, you know, don't have their ducks in a row, then I'm probably not going to do it. And so we did a rehearsal, and it clicked. And you know, I was kind of discovering with Slash's solo material, because, you know, even when Slash wasn't playing for Guns N' Roses, his solo material was a lot of fun to do, and it was kind of diverse because there's a lot of different singers that he was working with, Miles Kennedy and you know, the singer for Slash's Snake Pit. We were doing Velvet Revolver and you know, a bunch of stuff like that, and it was kind of fun. And you know, of course, the light bulb goes off in my head, and I'm going, Guns N' Roses tribute. So one day we were at rehearsal, and the bass player, he basically, you know, decided to bring up the elephant in the room about, you know, deciding whether the band was going to be a Slash tribute or a Guns N' Roses tribute, because it just seemed to make more sense to do Guns N' Roses. And so, you know, everybody had agreed, and then I wound up leaving Audio Garden and wound up doing Appetite for Destruction. You know, we started out with a bang, because by then I had you know, established a really good relationship with Live Nation, and so, you know, so they were allowing us to springboard my band at the House of Blues, you know, launching it and everything, and, you know, which was really, really nice. And the House of Blues Hollywood, rest in peace, because that place isn't open anymore. Right. I absolutely loved that place. They treated me so well. It was just a really, really good relationship with the House of Blues Hollywood. And you know, the Appetite for Destruction shows were so successful that as a thank you to me, they actually gave me New Year's Eve which is for any band, a New Year's Eve show is very coveted. Everybody, that's that's a venue's thank you to a band for doing a really good job. They gave me that 2 years in a row. And so Appetite for Destruction was able to do that, and
Amazing.
it just took off from there. And now here we are 9 years later, and it's still going. We're stronger than ever. I've got an amazing lineup. I've got a guy named Johnny Lucas on guitar. I have our newest member is a guy named PJ Zitarosa, Italian guy. He is one of the best. I hate to say it because it's not a knock on other guitarists. Yeah. PJ is extremely high level guitarist. One of the best guitarists I think I've ever seen in Los Angeles, and he's in our band.
That's
something.
I
can't believe it. We have a guy named Pat McGrath, who is also one of the best drummers in Los Angeles. And we have Tom Stillwagon on bass, holding down the Duff bass tones, and just an amazing lineup of musicians. And we've been together now, with PJ, being the newest member, but the core of the band's been together now for quite a while, and it's kind of created a brotherhood. I'm not used to that, and it took me a little while, but our band has become very tight, very close. We look out for each other. And it really shows now with all these difficulties going on with the virus. Our band is really sticking together and kind of looking out for each other.
That's great.
So it's just a wonderful relationship with all of these guys. I'm extremely lucky to be able to be at the at the helm, so to speak. It's just a wonderful experience. It really is a wonderful experience working with these guys.
Well, thank you. Thank you for breaking that down.
The coffee's working. I can't stop talking.